Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 37 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records, among many things, and I'm joined, as always, by my very good friend and cohort in this venture that we're doing, Mr. David Bash of the International Pop Overthrow Festival. David, how the heck are you tonight?
I'm doing fine, Mark. Looking forward to episode 37. It's
Episode
again every week.
37.
I say the same thing. I can't believe it's this many, but
And
here we are.
I can't believe the run of wonderful guests we've had, and we've gone sometimes outside of our what we call our comfort zone with some music type stuff. And before you even say anything of who's coming on tonight, tonight's going to be an interesting one. People are going to start logging in. They're going to say, "Hey, this is different for the Material Issues guys.
This
It's
is
different, man. This is going to be awesome."
I feel very confident that this will be a very informative interview, especially for us,
Yes.
Since this is an arena in which we don't have a lot of experience. But I
Indeed.
have a feeling I might be purchasing a few books.
I'm already half. Well, we haven't said who it is yet, but I'm halfway into one, and I ordered 6 for my dad. But my dad's a voracious reader, as you know, and this is right up his alley. And I don't think he's read this author that we're going to have on. So he's 93 years old, and he'll get a care package that he's going to love.
Wow!
Absolutely love it, and he'll say, "Is there any more?"
You're a good son.
Yeah, well, he deserves it. But David, quick question for you.
All right.
You love CDs. We know you love CDs. You love vinyl. You love all formats and things, and you get a lot of CDs in. I know for a fact that you've carried portable CD players around with your travels to listen to CD. Do you use MP3 players? Do you dump things digitally down to MP3 and carry something smaller, or is it always the portable CD player?
I haven't. It's really hard to find a good portable CD player these days.
Anymore.
Unfortunately, those that I've had have broken beyond repair. So lately, I haven't brought one. I've either used the external CD drive that I have with my new laptop, because laptops these days don't have
a CD drive yet. No.
Yeah. So I either use that, or I've taken to using Spotify and Bandcamp. I know we don't want
to go down that road again.
Well, I posted on Facebook my feelings about Spotify, and my philosophy in life is generally you've got to take the bad with the good. And no, it's not the good with the bad.
Yes.
You don't take the good with the bad. I mean, the good is what you want. So it's not something you have to take. Sometimes you have to deal with the bad to get the good. So you have to take the bad with the good. And I, you have to do that in life sometimes. And while
indeed.
Spotify has its issues, some very major ones, it's also been very good for me in discovering music and purchasing it.
Here we go. Let's talk about Spotify.
Well, we will mention briefly the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There, I mentioned it. Now we don't have to talk about it.
Oh, that's great.
It's the same damn thing. The announcements come in and people complain about who's on the ballot and it's not rock and roll. It's like, everyone, and I say this with all the love in the world, get over it. All right. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame hasn't been rock and roll for years.
Peace and love.
It's gonna get worse as time goes by, and there are no rock and roll acts left. They're gonna have to, because there really aren't. They're gonna have to nominate somebody, or they become pretty much antiquated. So
can it be the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with an asterisk?
At least like 2 asterisks.
I know
it says Facebook user, but I know who that is. Anyway, we could talk about all that, but I think it'll be more pertinent to bring on our guest. And speaking of Hall of Fame, if this gentleman ends up being elected to the Literary Hall of Fame, if there is such a thing, I don't know. It certainly would be apropos because he's written a lot of amazing books. He's had some bestsellers. He's been active for many, many years and still going strong. And yeah, it was almost accidental. In fact, he had another vocation before he became an author, and he just sort of fell into it. And we're all lucky. We're all lucky he did. So, without further ado, would you please give a huge welcome, hi Andy, to Mr. Alan Jacobson.
Good evening, Alan.
Hey, Alan.
How are you doing this evening, my friend? Nice to meet you.
Same here. Same here. It's wonderful to be on your show.
And as we briefly alluded to, this is an author, and we've had an author on our show before, one of our dear friends. But this
not
is truly
not anyone who's written books for 30 years, though.
Not somebody of this caliber. So right. This is quite exciting. And as I mentioned, my dad is a voracious reader, and there are certain authors that he and I love and share the common love for. We trade the books back and forth, and I buy him a ton. But we always look for that new author that's going to turn you on, and then you have a whole batch of material. And I'm happy to say, Alan Jacobson, my dad's got a load of your books on the way. So,
well, I'll tell you a very quick story about a father and his son and my novels. I don't know, about 6 years ago or so, I got an email from one of my readers who had emailed me previously about one of my books. And he said, I just want to tell you this story. My dad had cancer, and he had been in hospice for a few months, and I ended up reading all of your books to him. And it was very important father-son time where they shared these weeks at a time, just him reading to his dad. And he thanked me for that. And I mean, if there's something that can move you to tears, it's that. And
yes,
it kind of made me aware that, hey, what I do matters. It may be fiction, but it touches
exactly people. And we do this show, and we talk to a lot of musicians whose songs have impacted people in so many ways throughout their life. And to me, my dad and myself, we're both voracious readers, and there are books that take me back to time and places, and it's the same kind of emotional impact as a song too. It's the same kind of thing, and to have somebody say that to you, I can tell how that can make you really feel that what you've done has had an impact on at least somebody.
I mean, we all are reaching the age where we start to say, do we matter? Have we done things in our lives that matter? And
I'm always saying that. But it's interesting that you bring up something to the effect that even fiction. Did you see the movie Sideways?
Yes, the wine. You're talking about with the wine industry?
Yes. I've seen that movie so many times, so I know a lot of the lines. But I remember, Miles, the protagonist, was writing his novel that he hadn't finished, and they were asking, his buddy Jack was getting married, and the woman's father, they asked him about.
I lost the audio.
Do you hear us now?
Check 1 2.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Alan. Could you hear us?
Okay, let me check.
All right, take your time, buddy. It's all right.
I didn't touch anything.
I can hear you, David, right? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You and I can hear us.
Okay, let's try that.
Check 1 2. Alan, are we there?
Are we back?
You got it?
I can hear you. It's not as good as the speaker I have, but this will work.
Okay.
Right,
David, back to you.
Fine. Anyway, what I was saying is, in Sideways, the protagonist Miles, who was writing a novel, he he went over to his friend Jack's house, Jack's bride-to-be's house, and her dad was there, and he was talking about novels, and he was saying, with his accent, which I can't recreate, that there's so many real things in the world to write about. Fiction's a waste of time. And Miles said, interesting perspective. I certainly don't think fiction is a waste of time. There's so many, there's so many real things from which it draws. And, I'm glad there are a lot of novels. I had never even thought about that perspective, but I'm glad there are a lot of novelists out there.
Yeah,
Thank you. I mean, yes, the way I approach my novels, and I write, I have 3 series. They're all law enforcement based. One involves an FBI profiler, a female FBI profiler. And another one involves the Black Ops group that, the Navy SEALs used to be one of these groups before they became famous and everybody knows who they are. So there's one series that involves that group. And then a newer series that I just started that involves a fixer. So that allows me a lot of latitude to tell different stories. So yes, they're fiction, but as you noted, David, there's a grounding in reality. I write, when I was an English major in college, it was write what you know. That's what we always kept hearing. Writers should write what they know, right? And as I started to think about that, I realized that if I'm going to write what I know, that's pretty limited, right? I mean, even being a Renaissance person, you could travel the world. There's just going to be a limited amount of things that right? And a limited number of things. However, if you can learn and educate yourself and work with the people that actually do what you're writing about, now, not only do you know that stuff, but somebody that you can ask if you have questions and who you can run the material by and have them read it and say, okay, you got everything right, except this is not the way we would do it. And then I'll say, okay, well, tell me how we'll do it. And I'll see if I can change it without ruining a character or a story to make it accurate. So I always research my books very heavily. So yeah, the fictional part are the characters I create and the stories that I make up, but a lot of it is based in truth. And a lot of reviewers over the many years that I've been writing have commented that this reads like a rip from the headlines type story.
Right.
Some of it is with my own spin on it.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry, Mark. One thing which is the thing I alluded to before we went on the air, because I know this in a different form, is in junior high school busing coming into play, and being integrated in many different ways, including racially with other schools. Yeah. I had the same situation. I grew up in Poughkeepsie, I'm sure you know. Yeah. And while we didn't exactly have busing, we did have integration of schools from the middle class area that I lived and the lower class area that was also a part of Poughkeepsie. And it was culture shock on both sides. And when you're in 6th grade, you don't necessarily understand the other side's perspective, but you very much did. You went to bat for a lot of the other Black students, which was very commendable for somebody in junior high to be able to gain that perspective. I didn't have that until later on. It wasn't just with me. I was abused by all the poor kids, Black or white. And I was never locked in a basement or whatever it was that you had. Yeah. You had. I mean, physical and mental abuse for sure, but not as bad. When I read about what you went through, it's like, wow, okay, that's even worse. But how much of that has played into your writing?
Everything as a writer, everything you see, smell, taste, experience, definitely influences you when you sit down to write. When you sit down to outline, that's one thing. You can use that. But when you're in the character and when you're writing, things come out that you're not planning on, that weren't in your outline. And that's the beauty of it. We have debates amongst ourselves, writers, authors, which is better, outline or not outline. In fact, there's a term. It's a little derogatory, but not all writers consider it derogatory. Pantsers, because they fly by the seat of their pants. They don't know what's coming up next, right? And then outliners who, we're looked at as the anal group that, we have to have a map as to where we're going. Otherwise we can't write, can't create. It's really not that black and white. I mean, some people do fly by the seat of their pants, but some have an idea of who the characters are, where they want to go with the story, and they just kind of, they go with it. And that taps their creative juices. For me, I'm a hybrid. I do outline. I know my ending before I start writing, but I allow myself the freedom to create as I go. And that could be, coming up with another idea hits me, or I'm talking to an FBI agent and he or she will say something. I'll go, man, I didn't know about that. Okay, that's really cool. And then my brain starts, going into
taking it other directions. Yeah. And can you briefly hit on that a little bit, because you're known as an outliner. My daughter is an aspiring writer. And I know she'll be watching this broadcast as well. So what does it mean when you say you're an outliner, coming from somebody who doesn't really write on the scale that you're writing, as opposed to the pantsers?
So I walk into my office and I know what I'm going to write that day. A pantser walks into his office, no clue. Lee Child, who's one of the more better known names in my genre. He's more of a pantser. He walks into his office and he doesn't know what he's going to write that day. I walk in and I know where I left off, and I know in my outline what is going to happen next, and that's where I begin. Now, I used to use this analogy of I'm on a road trip and I have a map. And I'm starting out in California, I'm ending up in Queens, New York, right? So I know what route I'm taking. But along the way, I may say, hey, you know what? That mountain range looks really cool. So I'll get off and I'll explore that mountain range. And then when I'm done, I'll get back on the freeway and I continue along on my route until I see something else that's really interesting, and I'll get off there. So I give myself the ability and creativity to explore and create and deviate from my outline, but I always get back on the freeway, because that's going to lead me to what everything that I've been building and constructing is leading to. And I've never changed the ending once I start writing, but I've gone through the outlining process for weeks or months, sometimes 3 months before I start writing. And some of that is doing research as I'm outlining. I try to, like I said, hew to fact. So I don't want a cop in New York City to go, what? That's not how we do it. Come on, man, and close the book. So I do my homework. So that all goes into the outline when I'm writing the outline. The outline could be 30, 40, 50, 60 pages. It really depends. It was longer earlier in my career. I've noticed that they have become shorter, so maybe 30, 40 pages now. But I'll start writing, and this I've always done. When I get a scene that occurs to me as I'm outlining, I just start writing that chapter right in the outline. So my outlines are kind of weird. They're not formal outlines. They're like a blow by blow by blow, and then all of a sudden there's a scene, a chapter written, and then it goes back into the outline. It's weird.
I want to go back. I want to go back to something, that sort of allegory trip that you were talking about, and how things sort of you might like deviate from the path that you had originally intended. That brings to mind something you say on your website about randomness, and there were three key random events in your life that led you to doing what you're doing. One was having, I guess, Mr. Bell as an English teacher for 2 years, which pretty much drove your affinity towards English.
Yep.
Then becoming a chiropractor, and then having the injury to your hand. You were the Alan Harper of the literary world. And you had the injury to your hands, which then led you through, and then the having to give a recommendation to an employee, and then leading you to the blood spatter class, in which there was the FBI person, and you had the conversation. Do you still believe that randomness is a huge factor in people's lives?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can get very philosophical on this, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, you walk out of your house and you run into somebody and you talk to that person, and it could be a long-lasting friendship that influences how you make decisions in life. Or you could get hit by a car, right? And that changes, maybe you were a runner, now you can't run anymore. So now that's going to change your life. For me, the injury to my wrist was at the time horrendous. I mean, I was a very successful chiropractor. I loved doing what I was doing. Talk about helping people, making a difference. I mean, that was the epitome of it. I mean, so I was super happy. And then, tore the ligaments in my wrist, and that was like, well, now what? I mean, that was a very, very painful year plus when that happened. And as I mentioned, I got an English degree, and it was the most natural thing. And you mentioned Mr. Brill, Lou Brill, excuse me. I still call him Mr. Brill.
I said Bell.
A 12 or 13-year-old student, but he had a tremendous influence in. That is why I got my English degree in college, was because he opened my eyes to the beauty of English and writing. And very funny story is that when No Way Out came out, which is the 5th Karen Vale novel, I had dedicated the book to him, and the dedication was a very, very short lesson from one of his classes that I remember to this day. And I actually, there are several that I remember from his class, but this one was such a simple one, and it's the simplicity is its beauty. And it was teaching the importance of commas, right? So grammar is really dry stuff, right? But he made it fun. And here's an example. The dedication went something like this. It mentioned what it was and why I was dedicating the book to Lou Brill. And then I said, he wrote on the board, and I still remember him writing this on the blackboard. Now, this is, 40 years ago now, maybe a little bit more. And he's writing it on the board, and he writes, "Let's go eat, comma, grandma, period," right? So let's go eat, grandma. And then he takes the eraser and he faces everybody.
Yeah, I see what's coming.
And he wipes away the comma. "Let's go eat, grandma." And I'm sitting there going, holy shit, commas are important, right? So fast forward now a couple of weeks, I handed the manuscript in, and I get an email from him out of the blue. Now, this, I knew him, to me at the time, he was an old guy, right? Teaching a class. He was probably 27, right?
I know, really. Yeah.
He's a lot older now, as am I. And when you have an English teacher and a novelist emailing back and forth, you can imagine they are not short emails. They are long emails. And you can imagine the grammar is checked before hitting send. Right? So we corresponded, right? And then I said to him, you're not going to believe this, but the book that's coming out, whatever it was, September, so it was a few months off, is dedicated to you. And I said, I'm not going to send you the dedication until the advanced reader copy comes out, and I'll send that to you. And fast forward now to Thriller Fest, which was still is a big conference for thriller writers and their fans in New York City. And I had a panel discussion. I was on a panel, and my publisher happened to be the promotions department chair was on the panel with me. And at the end of the panel, this gentleman comes up and introduces himself. He says, Alan, I really enjoyed that panel. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Lou Brill. And I swear my jaw, exactly what you just did, David. That's what my expression was. I was beside myself, right? So I turned to my publisher and I said, this is my 7th and 9th grade English teacher. And it was an amazing moment. We took photos together, we chatted. He actually had a feature article in his hometown newspaper on Long Island. And it was him holding up a T-shirt that his daughter had made for him years before that said, "Let's go eat grandma. Let's go eat, grandma. Commas save lives." I thought it was hilarious, right?
It's the best.
And
awesome.
so he was wearing that with a copy of No Way Out that he was holding up. So it was an awesome.
So you didn't recognize him at all, huh?
I did not.
Wow.
I know I still have my image of him. I can picture him completely clearly, but you know, when I'm guessing he was 27, might have been 23, 25, who knows? Now he's 80, you know, I don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody looks the way they looked the last time you see them.
Exactly.
So
I don't look like I looked, you know.
I have
well,
the same
exactly.
experience. Recently on Facebook, somebody posted a 5th grade picture, in which you know I was in, and I looked at everybody, and it's like, I know they're all my age now, but this is how they're supposed to look.
Yeah.
They didn't look to me like a group of 5th graders from today would look. They look like they're supposed to look. You know, the images, they match the images in my head, so I totally get that.
Yeah.
Alan, speaking of the Karen Vale series, there's a question that came in from Andy Hartley right here. Can you see it? How important is it that you get the procedures and things correct, or does it depend on how you want the story to develop?
It's a good question. It's very important for me to get it right. So, you know, there's a few stories I could tell on that. One was I was working on a novel in the Karen Vale series. It involved the Drug Enforcement Administration. I was working with the DEA. I had to get congressional subcommittee approval they had to get it. I had to get it for them to work with me, because they wouldn't, you know, it's sensitive stuff. They wouldn't talk with me. And even though I had high up contacts and connections, they were like, we want to help you, but we need to go through the proper channels. I mean, they are a stickler, just like the Bureau, the FBI, on procedure and so on and so forth. So it took several weeks. I got clearance. And then I started working with some really high-level individuals and field agents, and one who had finished his career with the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is like the police department of the police. So they make sure that you know, that the agents do what they're supposed to do and that they don't break the law and so on and so forth. So he was a stickler for procedure, right? As you can imagine, that's what he did, right? That was his job.
Yeah.
So he read, and what I try to do is share the manuscript with my experts so that I make sure that I'm not screwing up the information they gave me and ruining it, you know. So he calls me up and he goes, Alan, you're not going to be happy. It's like, what's up? He goes, the scene with, you know, X, Y, and this, it really bothers me. It breaks procedure, and I just can't see an agent doing it. I don't even want to know that an agent might do something like this. So he was really upset with it. And, you know, it was the first time I really had the thought of, oh my God, you know, okay, so now I have a decision to make. Do I leave it and say, it's fiction, you know, get over it, which I would say, but, you know, I was going on the Eagles, you know, like you mentioned before I came on. Or, you know, do I find a way to fix it? And
I vote for find a way to fix it.
Exactly. And that's what I did. And I said to him, so how could this happen? And he goes, you know, why don't you do it like we used to do it in the old days? And it's like, oh my God, I like this already. So he tells me a suggestion, and I'll be damned. It was even better than what I had done, what I had written in that scene that upset him. So I changed it. I rewrote that chapter and a couple other things that followed. And I was really much happier that not only was I able to keep it real, but I was able to do it in a way that improved the manuscript. So, it was a win-win, and
Right.
that's always going to be my goal.
I'm very happy that that's your philosophy, because if there's one thing personally that I can't stand is when I'm watching, let's say I'm watching a TV show or a movie that depicts a certain time period other than the one that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's inaccuracies in terms of vernacular, especially, or factual inaccuracies, things that didn't actually. It drives me up a wall. And I realize 99% of the people who watch these things don't care. And that's part of the reason why the people who write them and produce them don't care. But I care, and I'm sure there are other people, and I'm glad you do too.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I see these shows too. There are a lot of FBI shows. There are a lot of serial killer, and profiler. And sometimes the writers will throw around the term FBI profiler. Well, I've worked with the profiling unit for, I don't even know how many years now. But at the time I wrote The Seventh Victim, it was more than 7 years. And it's just continued. Now it's, 20 years. And I see the crap, and it's not just, it's in novels, it's in TV shows, it's in movies, and all you can do is just roll your eyes. And I used to bitch to my wife during the show. Oh, come on. She's like, okay, you know what? You're ruining it.
I've got to watch TV with you, Alan. I'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah, the two of you sit there going, oh, come on. No, I agree. Come on. But Speaking of authenticity, though, Alan, you're known for being well-traveled in going to places that are going to be featured or talked about in your novels, and really getting in. And I'm halfway through Inmate 1577, and I heard you went to Alcatraz and spent time inside the rock to get the feeling of what it would be like on the inside, so to speak.
I spent a lot of time there, a number of trips. I wrote some of the scenes there with my laptop. In some case, there's an escape that occurred on Alcatraz that I include in my novel and basically insert my character into that escape. And the scene where they come out of the cell block and weld or cut through the bars. I'm sitting there with my laptop, and the bars that they cut through 3 inches behind me, my left ear. So, that's the kind of realism that you can't ask for and can't achieve unless you go. There were scenes I wrote in Las Vegas where I sat in a restaurant right on the Strip watching the Bellagio fountains and music going off as I'm writing that scene, which is in Velocity. I can go on, but England, No Way Out is set almost all entirely in England. My wife and I made 3 trips there to London and the outskirts that are featured in the story. I walked down every street I worked with Scotland Yard, the inspectors, and DCI. I can't even remember all their titles because it's different, and they asked me not to include them. I brought a signed book with me, and they wouldn't even take it because they were not allowed to take gifts. They were even more buttoned down, I would say, than the FBI. But it was during that trip that I actually had to be an ambassador for the FBI, for the profiling unit, because of one of the heads of the precincts there. It wasn't a precinct, but one of the metro offices where the police were located in this not so great neighborhood. And he had a good point, but he was mixing how things were done in England with how the FBI profiling unit does it. And he was completely right to have his concerns, but it didn't translate over to profiling in general. And I informed him. So I'm sitting there, and there's like 7 or 8 of the police, and high up people, because some of them brought me over to this station that morning. And I kind of like step back as they're having a discussion of what I just said. And I'm thinking, wow, did I ever think that I would find myself in London in a police station with, executives of the Metro police department and counseling them on how the FBI works and standing up for the FBI instead of, it was just a weird out of body moment. So it does matter to me. I do travel all over the world. In the Lost Codex, there's several chapters that take place in Paris. And I remember walking downstairs after finishing that section of the novel and saying to my wife, I feel like I just spent another 3 weeks in Paris. It was that intense, because when you're writing, you're just so totally engrossed. And then Dark Side of the Moon, which is one of the opposite Team Black books. Half that book is set on the moon. And
yeah, I remember when you went there. That was really interesting.
I had a decision to make, because I didn't want people to think it was science fiction. So I made sure, there you're talking about research, right? So I had to use present day technology and information that NASA, basically I had to use stuff that we have now, not near future stuff, but today, right? So I had zero contacts in this realm. So it wasn't like calling up, one of my FBI agent friends and saying, hey, do you have anybody that you could, connect me with at DEA or what? This was, I didn't know any astronauts. I didn't know any rocket scientists. I didn't know what I didn't know.
My wife, she would have helped you. My wife's an aerospace engineer. So
there you go.
If you ever need any help, you can pick her brains.
Have her read Dark Side of the Moon. She'll enjoy it.
I will.
I eventually found an astronaut nearby. It was another one of those, weird, how did this happen? It just, weird combination of things, right place, right time. And why I asked this person if she knew an astronaut, no friggin' idea, but I did, and she did. And anyway, it was just another one of those.
So if we hear about a Northern California man that jumped out of a 747 with $1 million strapped to his back, we pretty much know it's you doing a DB Cooper type thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
You're not supposed to tell people about that.
So what was the? Here's a question you get a lot, I'm sure, but we'll ask it anyway. What was the inspiration for Karen Vale, the first female FBI profiler?
So that is a really interesting question. And it took me actually years to realize what that answer was. The obvious answer is not really a true answer. It's only a partial answer. So Karen Vale, her backstory is that she was an NYPD beat cop before she went to the FBI and then promoted to the profiling unit. So, I was born and raised in New York. She was born and raised in New York. She has a sarcastic side to her that outwardly lessens as the series goes on. Like in the seventh victim, it's like she's in your face with the sarcasm, right? It lessens as the series goes on because she realizes not everybody likes sarcasm. Better to keep it to yourself. So she still has these sarcastic thoughts, but they're internal thoughts and monologue. She is a very funny character. But I realized a lot of her attitude comes from my upbringing in New York, and that's sarcasm, as you know, David. I mean, that's the way people relate to each other. You know too, Mark. I mean, that's Easterners. It's not an unusual way to. But when I moved to California, and my first roommate in chiropractic school told me, sarcasm not so good here.
Yeah.
And he also started making fun of my New York accent, and I lost the New York accent, as you could tell. Well, mostly. And
yes, you have, and I did too, by design. The same thing.
Yeah. And the sarcasm I tucked away, although it kind of comes out with my wife, and she's like, "Put that sarcasm away." But it comes out with Karen Vale. But now the partial answer that's only partially true is that I worked with two senior FBI profilers, Mark Safrick being the one that I met that you alluded to at the blood spatter pattern analysis course for the Department of Justice, and his partner, Mary Ellen Otoole. And Mary Ellen was the second female FBI profiler. The first one didn't last very long. So in my mind, Mary Ellen really was the first. And she was very open and forthcoming with the issues that she faced being a woman in the FBI, number one. That was a big deal then. And then even worse, being a woman in the profiling unit, dealing with serial killers and disgusting stuff that, men do to female bodies. And a lot of the other agents didn't think she'd be able to handle it, and she did. She didn't have a problem with it, just because she was female.
Right.
But she had to deal with that, and some of that made its way into the early books of the Karen Vale series. Definitely the Seventh Victim, maybe a little bit in Crush, but that also dissipated as the series went along. And the story relative to Mary Ellen is that I had written the first 75 pages of the Seventh Victim, and which at that time was called Dead Eyes. I have never disclosed that except on your show. This is the first time.
You're honored.
So I wrote the first 75 pages, sent it off to my agent, and it came to me. Karen Vale just came to me. Another one of those, like, I wasn't planning her. I just needed an FBI agent for this other book. And boom, it's like, oh, Karen Vale, K and V, tough, hard letters. Okay, great. That's it. That's the character's name. And boom, I just started writing, and she just flew from my fingertips. And I took her out of that book later and stored her away. I said, I got to use her someday. It's amazing. And then when I started doing my research with Mark Safrick, I realized this is the character I need to tell this story. And I started writing it, and I sent it off to my agent. So it was written in the first person. So and she said, no, you got to get rid of all this, start again. It's got to be the third person because your first two books were written in the third person and you'll confuse your readers. And so, she knew better than I did. She was in the business longer. And that's what you have your agent for.
Yeah.
So I was just, though, very upset because I thought it was the best writing I'd ever done. And, I basically used Microsoft Word, and I did find and replace, and I changed all the I's to she. And, so it was kind of like an act of frustration. But what I ended up with some rewriting to smooth it out and everything, was a first person sensibility in the third person.
And that worked.
It worked. And then some of the internal monologue, the thought process, I put in italics, so it's her thoughts. And some of that's very funny. And I alluded to the fact that, some of the Karen Vale series is funny. And that's part of it, is that you hear her, some of the things we would think and never say, we see what she's thinking, it's pretty funny. So Mary Ellen, I did not know her at this point. And I would go to the FBI Academy. I'd fly back to Quantico fairly regularly to meet with Mark, and he would take me on a tour of the academy and the profiling unit, which at the time was in the same place. Eventually, they moved the profiling unit away about 15 minutes down the road. But at the time, it was like being in Silence of the Lambs world, right? I mean, that's where those scenes were filmed right there. And that's what it was like, exactly as you saw in that film. And, dark, no windows, you're in the big sub-basement. And I was sitting in Mark's office, and we were chatting about one of the story points that I wanted to do. So he was helping me. And all of a sudden, so I'm sitting on the other side of his desk. To my left is the door to his office. door flies open, and I just hear, this woman yelling at him, not at him, but she's really worked up about a case, and she's pissed, and she's cursing, and then she steps forward. She saw Mark's eyes flick over to me, right?
Right.
So she peers around the edge of the door, and she sees me, and she points at me. She goes, "You're Mark's friend, the author." And I'm looking at this woman, right? This redhead, this agitated and real. And nothing is held back. She is, what you see is what you get. That is Karen Vale there. And I'm going like, oh my God, there's my character.
Right. Yeah.
And I said that to her. I said, I don't want you to get the wrong idea, but I just wrote the first 75 pages of my book, and you are my character. You even physically resembled her. So
wow.
That was the beginning of it. And as I said, Mary Ellen was extremely helpful in helping me understand from a female perspective, not just how she fit into the unit, but how the serial killers related to her and how she would approach an interrogation, or an interview. Because so Mark Safrick is 6'6", 260, something like that. Mark, if I got that wrong, I apologize. But I know he's 6'6" and he's 2 something, right? Imposing guy, right? So he sits down across from a serial killer. That's going to be very different than a woman who's 5'5" or 5'6" walking in, and the serial killer thinking he's going to control that conversation.
Right.
But that's what they all want to do. So her response, her approach is very different from Mark's was and is. And therefore, I, writing Karen Vale, I decided, I'm going to use a little of both and incorporate that into my character. And, there were times when I would bring a story during one of my visits. I'd say, okay, here's the concept I have for this novel. Here's the killer. Here's the setup, and then I'd watch them debate it, and I'd write down their comments and thoughts, and it was gold.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's a spam call.
No, that's your friend who's 6'6" but only 240.
Oh my God,
oh, it is. See?
There we go.
That's all right. That's hilarious.
I wanted to. You brought up serial killers, and obviously the standard response after a serial killer is uncovered is, I knew him, and he seemed like such a charming guy. In your opinion, is there a tell that most people just don't see?
And do you see it in David right now at all?
Well,
I have.
I've only killed once
about him. Yes, I have. I don't think there is, because their success rides on their ability to blend in and not have their anomaly exposed to others, because they have some very strange rituals that they do with bodies, and how, I don't have to go into it. It's gory, but they do some weird stuff with bodies, and
sure.
If they were to expose that in any way, then people, not only would they be caught, but they wouldn't have access to the people they want to have access to right. Hunt for their prey and ultimately kill them. So no, they blend in very, very well, and that's a major feature of how they are so successful for a period of time before they're not.
But can an expert tell?
So you mean just meeting a guy in the street, having a conversation?
Let's say, and you talk about randomness. Let's say an FBI expert were to encounter somebody who has killed and nobody knows it yet. Would they be able to see something that everybody else couldn't see?
So Yes, they would. So at the crime scene, absolutely, absolutely. But if if I'm meeting you for the first time, and let's say you were one of these killers, and we're just having a conversation, I, I might pick up that you have psychopathic tendencies, but a large percent of the population has psychopathic tendencies. That doesn't make them a killer. Um, so no, I would say unless they're having an in-depth conversation and the killer is not very smart, which there are some. Some are very bright, some are not. Um, but their survival rests on their ability to hide that side of their personality, so that they
Sure.
are not, talking about killing a dog or a squirrel and cutting them open and seeing what's inside. That's going on in their mind. That's not something they're going to have as a conversation. Yeah. Now, totally different if a detective walks into a crime scene, he sees a murder, sees the blood spatter, sees the body, he's looking at it forensically. A profiler walks into that same crime scene, he's seeing completely different things. So he sees the forensics, and he'll know what the forensics mean, but he's looking at different things. He's saying, the victim's face is covered by the dress. The dress is drawn up and covering the face. That's very significant, and that tells him something about the killer. He sees that there are cut marks on the abdomen. The detective goes, okay, that's weird. But
Keep
the
talking.
profiler,
My bladder is interrupting me.
Keep talking, Alan. I'm listening to you. It's fascinating.
So it's like knowing a language and being able to understand it versus hearing words, people discussing something and it meaning nothing because you don't know what those words mean.
Right. Yeah.
But the profiling unit has been working with detectives all over the world to educate them, not so that they could profile their own cases per se, but to know when they're dealing with something that should be referred to a professional profiler such as the profiling unit, or if their agency has a trained profiling team to refer to them as well.
Which goes so far deeper than the average person knows.
Absolutely.
And which is what you get into. But as our time is starting to wind down a little bit, there's two questions that I really wanted to ask. And we've covered so much here tonight, but looking at the poster behind you, Velocity, Alan Jacobson, and looking at the box sets that are on David's wall there, all the stuff, as far as we come from the music side of things, how involved are you, and how important is it that book covers look the way they look? So what is your involvement, and what do you think the importance of the cover of the book is?
I think the cover is incredibly important on a book. I like the Velocity cover. This happened to be left over from a book signing, and it was like, that's really cool. I'm going to hang it on my wall. But a book cover, so vitally important and so different from the old CDs that we used to get that had, and albums, LPs before that, the album art, and it's just very different. The book cover. So here's The Lost Girl, which is my latest book, which is I try to do it here, the Mickey Keller series, and you could see the design. It's designed to draw you in. You see the mother and the lost girl here, and it's a very emotional cover. It has something to do with the story. Album art for music, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it.
No, not at all in a lot of cases.
Exactly. So that's one big difference. Music is, I love music. I have music on all the time in my office, and I write with music, and I write with specific music sometimes. So if I'm writing a fast scene, I don't want a ballad. It helps to have something that's a little faster. if I need to be extremely creative, I'm putting on Electric Light Orchestra. ELO, Jeff Lynne is, just an amazing.
Big favorite of both of us.
Yep, my favorite musician. And when I need to get my writing done, ELO goes on and the creativity flows. But it's not just that. I mean, I listen to The Strokes and Green Day and Amy Mann, and Cage the Elephant is one I've discovered recently. Guster, The Killers, The Kooks, Bare Naked Ladies, The Cars, going back to my childhood, Counting Crows, of course Bob Seger, Toad the Wet Sprocket, another one of my favorite groups. I mean, it's just Ingrid Michaelson and the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney. It's just
there's a few out there. Yeah, there's.
it gets put the right music on, and I'm writing, and it's just a perfect soundtrack to. Now, also interestingly, when I'm writing the climaxes, and I know when I'm about to hit the climax of my novel, which will usually last about 50 pages, give or take. I start to see the whole. It's like a film in my mind. I with music, and I'm not a musician, so I can't write music. I always wish I could have written, learned to write music, but this music just plays as the movie plays in my mind as I'm writing.
I've written some liner notes for CDs, and I find that the writing flows out of me when I listen to prog in the background. Melodic prog. There was a label called Harvest Records. I'm sure you know about them, being an ELO fan.
Yeah.
There was a box set of Harvest called Harvest Festival, a bunch of stuff on the label. I wrote liner notes for a 60s band called the Millennium for their 3 CD set. Very soft pop, a little bit psychedelic. So what I was listening to was not in the same arena, but it really caused the words to flow out. It's the perfect background music for me.
And sometimes that'll make the difference between me being able to just immerse myself and have the creative juice flow, and not. And one of your viewers mentioned George Pelicanos, and he's an incredible writer, very, very talented. And he uses music apparently as well. I never asked him about that, but not surprising. I think a lot of us do. Although some authors, they want complete quiet. They cannot write. I can't write if it's a lot of slower, like if it's the Moody Blues, some of their spoken slower. It interrupts. I can't do
right.
that.
You're forced to actually listen to the lyrics, and you don't want to be doing that.
Exactly.
And real quick, Alan, I'm scrolling across the bottom of the page, alanjacobson.com. That's where everybody can really find all your social media sites, everything about all of your writing and things. So alanjacobson.com is the base for everything, correct?
That is it. Yeah.
Where can people order your books?
So, Amazon, your local independent bookstore can order them because, they have limited space, so they're probably not stocking my books. But then again, Barnes & Noble probably isn't stocking them either.
Which was another question I had. Do you lament, as we lament, vinyl shops and even CD shops going out of business from a writer's standpoint? I mean, we've got Barnes & Noble, and there's some little mom and pop places and whatnot, but the physical product is not what it used to be as far as availability. And we talk about the covers and how important a cover, standing out is.
Yeah.
From your point of view, what does that mean for an author or a writer if the physical product is on I don't know what kind of plane we're talking about anymore, but musicians have the same problem.
It's a mixed bag. The ebook revolution, let's call it that, just like kind of MP3s taking over, right? The ebook revolution, I think it saved publishing. I think it saved a lot of authors' careers for a number of reasons. I remember. I mean, I've been in publishing since 1994, and I remember when your book was in the stores for at most 6 weeks, if you were fortunate, and then it was gone. It was
Okay.
shipped back to a warehouse, and it couldn't be gotten unless somebody came in and requested it, and it got shipped from a warehouse back. Then it was remaindered, and then it was torn up and shred, and it was gone, and then it was out of print, and nobody could get it. Nowadays, books don't go out of print because there's the ebook, and it costs nothing to warehouse. It costs nothing to ship, so to speak, over the airwaves, and so a lot of books that were out of print are back in print, and people are reading it, and authors, are able to collect their royalties from very, very old works. That was something that never existed. So we have to keep it all in perspective. I personally like reading ebooks. I like hardcovers too, but when I travel or I'm standing in line at a bank, and I can pull out my iPhone and pull up the Kindle app or the iBooks and read right there where I left off last night in bed. I mean, that's just incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
And so again, I'm a tech guy. I understand technology. For me, I'm comfortable with it. There are some people who need to be holding this physical book, and
My daughter Hannah, my daughter Hannah's like that a bit though. She loves the physical, as
Yeah,
we do
I'm the
with our
same way.
vinyl, and we like that. You know, we like to hold
absolutely,
it. Yeah.
and I totally get it. I had hundreds of CDs, right? And I had to clear out my office because we refloored it. And it's like, what do I do with all these CDs? And my wife's like, well, get rid of them. You don't need them, because you're going to stream,
Ooh.
right? And I'm like, get rid of them. She's like, well, yeah. What are you saving them for? You Apple Music has anything you want. And I couldn't argue with that logic, and it does take up a lot of space, hundreds of CDs. But at the same time, she wasn't wrong, but
She wasn't right.
I hope you kept them.
I remember getting rid of all my LPs when we
Yeah.
moved from Sacramento to the Bay Area, and that was, of course, back then it was like, well, there are no record players anymore, so well,
Yeah.
look what happened.
And
I
when you
have one last question for
Go
you.
ahead, David.
Yes.
I got one. I have one after you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this has been awesome. But I have one last. I'm not going to ask you who your influences are because I know you don't want to leave anybody out.
Yes.
But I've read that some of your books have been optioned. I would love to see the Karen Vale series become a TV, Netflix or some streaming series. If you had your choice of who to play Karen Vale, who would it be?
Oh, good question.
It is a good question, and my answer has changed over the years because, when the Seventh Victim came out in 2008, there was one set of actresses that I, would have given you, and they've, it's no longer the same set of actresses. A lot of time has passed. I remember my agent emailing me one day, and he goes, "Could Sharon Stone play Karen Vale?" And this was, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago now. And I'm like, ugh, wow, okay. Probably 20 years earlier she could have,
Oh, yeah.
but probably just not the right age for Karen Vale. But I think she would have done a damn fine job.
Oh God, yeah.
In the right age group. There's Elizabeth George is an actress that I think would be, she was in a series, The Hunted, which I think only lasted one season. Right, and I remember Hunted. I remember that because I wrote a book called The Hunted. But she was just awesome in that. And I thought, man, she would do a great job playing Karen Vale. She's the right age. So, she would be one of my top choices. But, then you're talking about TV or feature. And we had an offer for a feature film. At the same time, we had an offer for a TV series, TV movie, 2-hour TV movie with the potential to develop Karen Vale into a TV series. This was with TNT, And my agent said, which one do you want to take? I was like, well, how do you make that decision, right? It's a good decision to have to make. But he said, look, you go movie, 5 years from now, we could still be saying, why haven't they gone before the cameras? What's going on? Or if the studio head changes and he says, get rid of all the old projects where I want all my, my name on all the projects. He said, TV, within 6 months, 99.9% chance it's going to be on screen. Oh, okay. So we went the TNT route, Turner. And the idea was 12 best-selling novels adapted to film. And Scott Turow's sequel to Presumed Innocent was the first one. And there were a bunch of really skilled authors. And the first 6 were filmed and aired, and then we were going to be number 7. And I was co-producing. We had a great producer who got it, because sometimes the author's vision doesn't align with the producer's. And they commissioned a screenplay. It was a female screenwriter. She did a fantastic job adapting it, which is very difficult. 2 hours from a 400-page novel can't, sometimes you lose a lot of stuff. She did a great job with it. And the ratings were horrendous. And I didn't realize what the issue was. All I knew is that the sponsors pulled out, and there went our multi-million-dollar, I think it was a $4 million budget. We had tax incentives from North Carolina to film there. Anyway, it fell apart. We got the rights back, fortunately. And about a year later, I was talking with Scott Turow about it, and he said, well, you know what happened, right? And I went, no, they never told me. He said, well, the NBA went on strike. I went, yeah. He goes, the NBA on TNT.
Yes.
TNT is the NBA. That's their whole advertising platform. So when they went on strike, they didn't have a backup plan, I guess, to promote it, and the movies tanked. And anyway, so thanks, guys.
Another random event. Yeah.
Well, that was basically my question. David was getting into exactly that, and he's covered my final volley, so it was all good. Alan, we thank you so much for joining us here on Material.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun.
We always get to this point where it's like, heck, we could have gone on for another hour. You've been a wonderful guest, and this has been, as somebody posted earlier, fascinating conversation, and we appreciate your time. We do. And AlanJacobson.com is where you can find out more on Alan and all the books he's written, and get them on Amazon, as I did, and enjoy the heck out of them. Alan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was a lot of fun.
Have a super night. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay grateful. We'll talk to you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, David, episode number 37. I need a chiropractor. Is any former chiropractors in the house? Oh my gosh, that would be nice. That was we did allude earlier. We've had one other author on, the great John Borak with his Beatles book. We like to
we had Paul Myers.
Paul Myers. Yeah, he's an. We've had a couple actually has written some fantastic things, but this was more in my wheelhouse as far as what my dad and I read and love. So this has been absolutely wonderful. As I said, I'm halfway through Inmate 1577. I didn't get to ask him about his quote talking about how writing dialogue is deceivingly difficult when you're trying to cut all the fat out and still get the point across, which to me really makes a good book, because I never thought about that before. But how do you cut the fat out, keep it concise, and still get the point across? Yeah, exactly. So, kudos to Alan for doing a great job with that as well. And one other thing I just want to quickly mention, David, I know we talked about earlier, but somebody popped up and asked to mention it. A few weeks ago, we had the wonderful George Boyder on from the Head Boys. Mm-hmm. Very good friend of mine. Of course, the Head Boys lost album on Pop Detective, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. He had a blood vessel burst in his head a few days ago, and in the hospital, and was in a coma, and on a ventilator. And I was getting information from his brother-in-law, and of course we send all the best out to his family.
Absolutely.
What I did hear later today is that he has come out of the coma, and although he has not really opened his eyes or anything, he is moderately responsive to somebody talking to him.
Oh,
and
that's great. That's great news.
You can tell that there's something positive going on. So God bless you, George. We all send our best to you, and
Absolutely
thinking of you here on
Godspeed.
Material Issues.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. But David, as we always ask, what do we got coming up in the next couple of weeks?
All right. Well, we've got quite a bit coming up for the next month, actually, the next 4 weeks. Next week, February 9th, we have the main man of one of the greatest bands of the mod revival in the UK 1980s. Paul Beauvoir of the Jet Set will be our guest, and he has a brand new album. I finally got a copy, so of course it's not handy when I need it. There it is. A Balloon to the Moon, and it's oh, I guess that's Hannah. Because I don't have any kids, so you must be the dad.
That must be somebody.
At least I don't have any that I know of. Yeah, I know. I didn't have sex back then. Okay. A Balloon to the Moon, which is not mod. It's more like it's more soft pop, but it's beautiful. And
beautiful.
It's out on CD and vinyl, and definitely something worth checking out. So we'll talk to Paul about that, and of course his history and all that good stuff. I'm sure he'll be an awesome guest. On February 16th, it'll be our first and hopefully not our last. Our first guest who had a =1 record on the Billboard charts. That's right, Mr. Gilbert O'Sullivan will be our guest. =1, a few #2s, other top 20 hits, and still going strong. He released an album a couple of years ago. I'm sure he's got something in the works, and his tour, which was scheduled for 2020, I'm sorry, 2020, but was canceled due to COVID, is going to happen, and he'll be all around the U.S. in March and April. So look out for him. I'm thrilled to be able to be going to one of his LA shows in March. So that'll be great. That one, by the way, will be on.
Oh, yeah.
That one will be on a little bit earlier, 3 hours earlier than usual, to accommodate his schedule in the UK.
Right.
So we'll talk more about that as we get.
We'll let you know. Yeah.
February 23rd. Member of one of the greatest power pop bands of all time. He was from the second iteration, but contributed so much, especially to the album Starting Over, which a lot of people, including our good friend John Borak, think is their best album. Yes, it's Scott McCarl of Raspberries fame, going to be on the 23rd. He released a disc called Play On. Great. About 25 years ago, and it's being reissued with bonus tracks. So by the time he's on, I think that will be out and available. So we'll have a lot of fun talking with Scott, I'm sure.
Yep.
And then on March 2nd, 4 weeks from today, the man who really is most responsible, I feel, for the power pop renaissance that took place in the mid-90s, because he published the first magazine completely devoted to the genre, Yellow Pills.
Yep.
Yes, we'll be having Mr. Jordan Oakes.
Wow. Yep.
Not only is he extremely well versed in power pop, but he's a really fun guy. Just hang around Jordan when he came out to LA for Poptopia and IPO back in the 90s. The guy was so full of puns and was so spontaneous. I mean, he had me in stitches. I'm not much of a laugher, but there were a couple of times. I remember John Borak and Jordan were in 7-Eleven, and I don't want to give away what he said, but he had me in stitches. He had me on the floor, not being able to breathe. Just basically relating some 7-Eleven's products to people we knew in a way only Jordan could do. And so he hasn't lost his sense of humor at all. So this should be a lot of fun having him on March 2nd. And we have other irons in the fire. I'm thinking we're going to have a really cool guest on March 9th. It hasn't been 100% confirmed, so I don't want to mention who it is yet. We're looking, and again, we're in contact with a lot of people for the weeks that lie ahead. So, as always, we'll have some cool guests. And
the way you're going to keep up with this stuff is if you join the Material Issues group on Facebook, or if you have to, go over to materialissues.com, which takes you to the YouTube channel. You can join there. But if you join, then you're going to get the notifications that tell you what's coming up or when we're going live, and you can plan your Wednesday evenings, 3 p.m. Pacific Coast time, 6 p.m. East Coast time, something p.m. over in the UK.
11 p.m.
11 p.m.
Except for when Gilbert's on, that'll be 8 p.m.
That'll be 8 p.m. a little earlier. So that's what you got to do. Tell all your friends that there's some great guests. Everything's archived here on Facebook groups and on YouTube. So if you've missed any of the first 37 episodes, including this one, you can go back and look at it, and you can leave comments as well.
But if possible, please watch live because and leave comments while it's happening. We're very grateful for those of you who
Yes,
do
we
that.
are. Yes, and, we are.
We'd love more. Especially
and we do have
a really good question that we can ask spontaneously to our guest. We love that. So
sometimes we can't get the question or something comment up, and it's not because there's some spam things that happen that I just delete, but sometimes it just doesn't work in the flow of the conversation we're having with the guest, and you can't just interrupt a conversation flow with, oh, look, here's a, so sometimes it doesn't always work. But
yeah, I mean, sometimes with me too, I sometimes can't get it up,
Yeah, and and it doesn't get up, so you just move on. But we don't single out anybody purposely for comments and say we're not going to let that in.
No, of course
it just doesn't. Sometimes it's not in the flow. So, but we do appreciate everybody joining in, asking questions, and having a good time. That's what it's all about here on Material Issues.
Anyway, we've gone way over our a lot of time. But what the hell? We're not corporate. We can do what we want.
We can do what we want. I can wear calling occupants of interplanetary craft T-shirts. And David can come out with his.
I can show a super abnormal amount of box sets and not have to worry about our audience getting turned off or creeped out and leaving. So there you go.
There you go. Well, my friends, David, have a great night. Stay happy. Stay healthy.
You too, Mark.
Keep fighting the good fight. Say hi. Love to Rena. And we'll see everybody next Wednesday right here. Material Issues.
Thank you all very much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.